Testing the sound, testing the sound. Yeah. Test, test, test. Testy, test, test. All right. Okay. Hmm. Hey, Star Fam. Welcome or welcome back. My name is Laura Black, and this is Blacklight Astrology. Here to talk to you today about the full moon in Taurus for 2025. Quite a full moon we've got coming here. This is happening on November 5th, which is a Wednesday morning here in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, 5:19 a.m. But please do change that for your time and location on the planet. Start over. You gotta have one mess up, you know. Hey, Star Fam, welcome or welcome back. My name is Laura Black, and this is Blacklight Astrology. I'm here today to talk to you about the Taurus full moon for 2025 happening on November 5th, 5:19 a.m. That's Pacific Standard Time, so do be sure to change that for your location on the planet. It's happening on a Wednesday morning in the wee hours here where I live. And my goodness, what a full moon. Oh dear. Exciting, exciting is what I mean. You know, I always have to tell, especially my newer clients, there is no good or bad in astrology. It is what we make of it. It is like everything in life. It's what you make of it. It's how you show up inside of it. This is a very interesting, potent full moon. And wouldn't you know it, we have present a finger of God. So, yet another lunar cycle in 2025 with another Yud. I can't believe how many fingers of God there have been in the lunar cycles of this year. That is not normal. And if you've watched any of my videos or if you've been a client of mine and has anywhere had a Yud in any one of your charts or your relationship charts, you have heard me talk about it because I am a little bit obsessed with the finger of God. I've had to work through I have multiple Yods in my chart. I'm going through Yod activation, which is when the true fate comes into play. And a Yud is not only a mark of fate, it's the most significant fated marker in a chart, and it's timed fate. Unlike the 29th degree, which, you know, we're all experiencing under this full moon, the planet Neptune at the 29th degree of Pisces, that is a mark of fate, but it's fate on an open timeline. It's fate that you control at least when it gets done or when the experience occurs, you know, when you learn the lessons. But a finger of God is very timed. And in a birth chart, there's a way of seeing when that timing comes into play. It's when an outer planet passes over the apex of the the thing being pointed at, or what we call the release point, the exact opposite point of the apex. But when we have a finger of God in a lunar cycle, that sort of fated feeling is present all the way through until the next lunar cycle. So here we are, the full moon in Taurus, and we have following this on what I think the 19th or 20th of November, the new moon in Scorpio. This finger of God is just present for these 2 weeks. And it's showing up in everybody's life somehow. It will be particularly potent for you, of course, because the full moon happens at 13 degrees of Scorpio and Taurus. If you have any placements near the mid degrees of the fixed signs, Scorpio, Taurus, or Leo or Aquarius, this is going to be a really major full moon for your year. But if you have any planetary placements at the latest degrees of Libra, I myself am a late degree Libra rising, Saturn and Pluto, all in those last couple degrees of Libra. And so this is hitting me right on my ascendant. Hello. It's right in the face, this one. But yeah, I guess we could argue that if you have any placements at the last degrees of any of the cardinal signs, Cancer, Capricorn, Libra, Aries, this is a big one for you as well. Yeah, the release point itself is in the last degrees of Aries. What is this finger of God? Okay, so first of all, Full moon in Taurus. We know that a full moon is a lunar, it's a cycle in which something lunar, so something about our emotional body, something about our inner experience, and its relationship with the sun, the super consciousness, the life force that pumps through us, the ego. Although not our ego, our sun placement in our birth chart, right? This is a sort of different presence of the overarching power that drives life, this life force of the sun. That interplay is coming to a culminating moment where something is being fully illuminated in the dark of the night. Something is being purged. It's a sort of peak of the high tide, and now the tide is going back out, that sort of a thing, where we've reached the full awareness, both internally and now externally when it's a full moon. And we'll start the process of shedding and letting go until we come down to the new moon 2 weeks later. Each full moon correlates to the new moon that occurred 6 months prior. So this full moon in Taurus is glancing back to the events of April of 2025 when we had the new moon in Taurus. And the events that were happening at that time in your life, you may now, in this Taurus Scorpio axis of your chart, wherever that may be, you may now be really seeing things clearly. I know I am. Oh my goodness. Especially considering just how wishy-washy, murky, and confusing things were in the spring, or it was the spring in this hemisphere, back in April. Now we're getting real, we're getting raw, we're getting vulnerable, we're knowing the ugly truth of things this Scorpio season. And this full moon in Taurus is saying, look, we're trying to root down and find our sense of stability and grounding, even amidst all of this, ugliness around us, or perhaps it's within us. The dark realizations, and there have been many. For many of us, we are sitting with ugly, bitter truths. For those of us who are willing to look at all, we have had Black Moon Lilith moving through the sign of Scorpio for the last several months. Lilith, of course, is the first wife of Adam. There are some iterations of the mythos around Lilith that describe her as being the snake in the Garden of Eden, hence the tempting of Eve. And she has a great deal to do with the story of the patriarchy in its origins and still unfolding to this day, and how it's harmful to everyone, including men. So Lilith, in her finest hour, is a sort of a signal of reclamation of power. The sign that she's in is how she reclaims that power by absolutely defiantly standing up against all things that are illogical, unjust, or, and this is the most important key I think about Lilith, out of alignment with the instincts or the innate messaging that Lilith receives from her body. That's kind of the essence, the core essence story of Lilith, is that she was given a body. She was the result of Adam wanting to copulate, and God taking Adam and splitting him in half for the masculine and the feminine components of this one creation, so that they could be brought together in unison in the flesh and procreate. So Lilith's gift is that given this vessel as the divine feminine, she knew how to feel, how to, there's that sensual component, that listening to the vessel, that kind of the divine feminine quality of understanding the supple, the subtle, the intrinsic, the intuitive. And she felt that her body wanted something very specific and a sense of power with that, a degree of dominance, at least in this act of copulation. And when that was denied her, she recognized the lack of logic in that denial. That why would you give me this beautiful piece of technology that signals to me my desires and then tell me that the gift you've given me and the signals that come from that gift are somehow not important, don't listen to those, not necessary. Like what are you talking about? You, source energy, the divine God, gave me this vessel and it has this power to tell me what I crave. And you're telling me that that's not allowed or just unimportant, to ignore that. Well, sorry, I'm not going to do that because I've been given this miraculous vessel and I'm going to listen to it deeply because this vessel that I have, this is of the divine. This was given to me to carry, to be the carriage for my consciousness in this life. So I'm at least going to honor that vessel and respect its signals, or at least learn from listening to them. So Lilith is all about the standing for what comes from within. And by within, I mean the within the cells of the being, within the technology of the human body and its wisdom. I'm patting my head here. So Lilith in Scorpio is very much this way of reclaiming the self and reclaiming the power by digging to the truth, by being real, by getting honest and vulnerable, by letting go, by surrendering that which can no longer grow, allowing the dead leaves on the plant to fall away so that the rest of the plant can thrive. There are layers of skin. It's like the dead skin cells. Can you imagine if we held on Taurus style to all of our nails and hair? Isn't that a movie somewhere? Isn't that like in some romantic comedy, some guy collects all of his skin and hair and nail trimmings or like the skin cells and he just has like bags full of the parts of the human body that want to fall away, chip away, die off. Hmm, disgusting. Um, yeah, that's very Lilith in Scorpio saying, you know what, there are parts that were me or part of me and part of this vessel that have to fall away. And nature shows us that. And in my opinion, this is just, the gospel according to Laura Black, so do with this what you will. But in my opinion, much of the world's suffering, much of human suffering, the world's suffering because of humans' impact on this planet, comes from the separation from nature and the separation from death, Scorpio. From when we remove ourselves from the fullness of the life cycle or what life is, and a necessary component of that is death and the death cycles, well, we get sick in all kinds of ways. And this is just my opinion that a whole lot of the darkest side of what's happening in humanity, pick a subject, any of the dark side of that, may stem from our separation from the fullness of nature and what nature does. What this, it's like, what do we even call it? Life. What are we doing here? Well, it shows us at least part of what we're doing here. There will always be this great mystery. According to astrology, some things cannot be known. That's the realm of water, particularly Pisces, the great mystery of life. And Scorpio is the mystery of why things must die away and be reborn, that life death cycle. So with Lilith in Scorpio, very Chinese astrology, the year of the snake and shedding the skin. Lilith in Scorpio these last months has been a phase that comes around once every 19 years that is giving us an opportunity to really get back in touch with the death cycles in our lives on every scale, particularly in your chart, wherever you have the sign of Scorpio. There is a patterning that Lilith is coming through to obliterate. She's showing up, she's feeling into her body, she's listening to her instincts, and she's willing to take what's there in your chart and in your life down into the underworld and strip away the flesh that cannot continue on, that's not really going to be a contributing part of the thriving essence of that part of your life. So Scorpio, the Scorpio Taurus axis, the axis of on the side of Taurus pleasure and on the side of Scorpio pain, is being illuminated right now under this full moon. And we're really, under the new moon in Taurus in April, we still had Lilith in Scorpio, but it was in the earlier stages. Just the first days of Lilith in Scorpio, I believe. And so now at this point, the full moon is saying, all right, we see what we value, Taurus. We see what can thrive or what we want to build upon. We see what is worth our efforts. We see how we want to show up with our work ethic and contribute to the slow, steady small steps, growth that we want to see in our lives. But in order to achieve that, there are things over here in this Scorpio, I almost said Scorus, the Scorus realm, Scorpio Taurus, in the Scorpio side of things that must shrivel away and die. So, whatever that may be in your chart, we are letting go. We are shedding. We're trimming the nails, we're cutting the hair, we're shedding the skin. And what I love about this chart is that we have the asteroid Nemesis sitting over here. That's what this funny little symbol is, sitting exact with Black Moon Lilith. And whether we pull up true Lilith or mean Lilith, they're pretty much the same in this chart, just half a degree apart, actually. I think true Lilith's at 25 degrees. So this is really potent. Nemesis with Lilith. And Nemesis is an asteroid that is kind of exactly what it sounds like. There is, of course, a light side or a way to work with the asteroid Nemesis that can be to our benefit. But Nemesis can be where we sort of place all of the blame. When we talk about blame shifting in our own lives, the way that, when we as humans are not capable of seeing all of our darkness and taking full responsibility and a sort of radical ownership over our lives. Nemesis often describes in the chart the place where we point the blame. And it can be a sort of big ego death area for us. I know that's so true in my chart. I happen to have Nemesis not too far off from my Venus in my 10th house. It's been a big issue in my life. So, this Nemesis, I have a great deal of respect for this placement for those of us who are willing to look at how we blame shift and look at how we can be our own worst enemy, what the true Nemesis is. And in Scorpio, with Lilith, there's this potential for some of us to get incredibly, painfully honest with ourselves about how we are our own worst enemy, our own nemesis, or looking out to the places where we have projected blame and doing what we can to own our part in that, but also examining that external nemesis. That's very true as well. But Lilith and Nemesis together is an incredible kind of teaming up of these forces of wanting to look at the darkness. This is a full moon that is brutally honest if we're willing to listen. The dark side of this is shutting down into absolute denial. No, it's not even, I mean, it could be about escapism. Of course, we've got this grand water trine here. It's technically a kite, if we want to include the vertex in this mix as well. But this grand water trine could be saying, yeah, you know what? Just escape. The grand water trine, as I talked about in my last video, is not necessarily good. As I said in opening this video, there is no real good or bad in astrology, which is kind of infuriating, right? When you go to your astrologer and they tell you that this thing is coming and you go, well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I get that question all the time. And it's like, yes. That's my answer. Yes. And now what are you going to do with that? That's the real key here. So a grand water trine, while it is this extreme access to the subtle energies, to the unseen realm, to what we feel and what we intuit, more than what is spoken or expressed or executed on, this can be just a river of shit. It can be just flowing excrement, flowing like the sewers, one of my friends said the other day. So, from this Lilith Nemesis component, for anyone not willing to be really brutally honest and look and do the hard work of seeing, the dark side of anything, especially within the self. Well, there's an escape point right out to Jupiter in Cancer, which, depending on where the moon is, both in your birth chart and in the sky at any given moment, we can find the escape route there. So in this case, the full moon being in Taurus, the escape route could be right into the simple pleasures. Spending the money, or for workaholics, working for the money, eating the food, having the sex, getting into escape through staying in your comfort zone, getting into the creature comforts, buying the thing, doing the thing that makes you feel like, okay, I'm fine, everything is good. Sometimes that's the dark side of a Taurus moon, is like, It just gets stuck in that comfort realm and doesn't want to budge out into the realm of discomfort. So that could be a dark side of this. And then you could just as easily escape from this demand of Lilith and Nemesis to dig and shed and surrender and examine and own your own Nemesis within by flowing right out into the North Node in Pisces and just escaping any way you can, be it whatever drug or whatever avenue, your screens, your, oversleeping, undersleeping, stressing out, living in anxiety without doing anything to show up for yourself to create more of a sense of ease. So this grand water trine is certainly not just like God's gift to us to float gently down the stream, but we could make it that. We could make it, we got to build ourselves a sort of lifeboat under this lunation. Now, the ruler of the Taurus moon, Venus, is at the 28th degree of Libra. Thankfully, not the 29th. We're not in that extreme place of Libra energy where the scales might be really jarred back and forth and the extremes of the best of Libra, the grace, the diplomacy, the promise to create a contract, the commitment of harmonizing with others or designing something that brings more beauty, finding justice and balance. Or the worst of Libra, feeling like the grass is always greener on the other side and just being so passive and so passive aggressive and so unable to discern and pick out which direction to go, which way to choose, which side to be on. We're not quite in that extreme realm, but we're just shy of that. It's pretty potent Libra energy. Now, you can look at this two different ways. I've heard astrologers take two very different takes on these final degrees of any sign that are not the critical degree. It's usually about 27, some say 26 degrees, but 27 and 28, they're not anaretic. It's not the potent, degree of mastery where you will be faced with the best of and the worst of and have to prove that you understand that full spectrum in a sense. But some astrologers will say that as you get into those later degrees, there's a sort of diminishing of the sign, like it's dispersing, it's falling, it's dying away, it's ending. We're coming to the end. Personally, that's not been my experience. When I see the 28th degree, I see a lot of the energy of that sign, and we're getting more skilled with it. Of course, that depends on any other planet that's interacting with it by aspect. It's depending on the condition of that planetary placement in the whole of the chart. It's always in the context of the whole. These planets don't live in a vacuum. But, some astrologers will say as we get to the 28th degree that it's really you're seeing the best of because we're starting to master it. And when you tip to the 29th degree that you are entering the testing ground where things get really chaotic because there's a culmination and a sense of extremes and a sort of test. I don't love that. As a survivor of the Mormon cult, which teaches you that life is a test and you get one and then you become a god or a goddess or you fail or whatever. I always feel a little icky about that idea that life as a test. But it is Earth School, apparently, and there is an opportunity at the very least here to learn and to grow and I don't know, that when you consider Alan Watts's dream of life, if you haven't heard Alan Watts' little speech, The Dream of Life, go look it up. It's fantastic. When he talks about how, of course, souls, if what we are doing here is living lifetime to lifetime as souls that are a fragment of the essence of source, whatever it is that we call God or the divine, the oneness, the great, the all. If we are in fact little slivers of that source playing out a little game, then yeah, it's the challenges of life and the sort of testing grounds that we get to at these extreme degrees. Well, it's not so much a test and a demand and expectation from some godly figure, some daddy on high that's separate from us and punishing us if we don't get it right. It's us, the oneness, the source, all wanting to have fun. It's Leela, the Hindu expression of that play of life. Like wouldn't it be fun to explore? I think in my last video I was talking about the Hindu story of creation, the Shiva and Shakti of it all, and pushing Shiva pushing Shakti into existence, and she fell through nothingness, and that's where the word Om came from, which, if you're not familiar with the word Om in Sanskrit, it is meant to be a representation of the entire Sanskrit alphabet from beginning to end that starts with this open mouth "aw" and goes through all the vowels, all the sounds of the Sanskrit language and ends with kshum, om, and closes it off. It gets through the whole range of what the human mouth is capable of creating with sound in terms of sound and that expression of vibration out into the world. That's what Om is. I love if you've never learned the history or the history, is that a thing? The meaning of Om, go look it up. I found this to be one of the most fascinating parts of one of my favorite yoga teacher trainings I've done, where we examined the history and tradition of yoga and looked at I got to at a wonderful teacher who studied Sanskrit very seriously, and I got to learn some of these details of this incredibly pithy language of Sanskrit. I by no means have studied Sanskrit, by the way, just to be clear, but my teacher has, and it was really fascinating to learn some of those little details about what that word, that sound actually means or is trying to encompass or encapsulate. Yeah, why was I going on and on about my little ADHD ramble rant? Oh, creation. All right. So here we have this 28th degree, fairly potent, not quite complete, not quite the extreme degree. And, really we're having fun as beings. I try to remember that when I'm having a hard time on this planet because my goodness, I try to remember that, I was bored with all the easier life experiences. And that's why I'm playing this game. This brings me back to Alan Watts' little dream of life of I wanted a bigger adventure, a bigger challenge. Wouldn't it be wild if I experienced X, Y, and Z and just didn't know how it was going to turn out? That kind of thing. So I always think that when I see these later degrees, especially when I or my clients are really struggling or suffering, and there's that pervasive question of why? Or at least I ask that question as a Gemini. So there we are, 28 degrees, Venus, Libra. She sits square Jupiter, which just magnifies the hell out of her, blowing her up for a huge examination. She's sitting square, she's approaching the square to Pluto, which we will have to go through as she enters Scorpio right after this full moon. Prepare for that. Brace for impact, everyone. But she is in a stress aspect with Uranus and Neptune slash Saturn is tied in there as well. And the release point of this finger of God is right into Chiron, which happens to be sitting with the part of fortune through this lunation. And part of fortune right there, that little X guy, is X marks the spot. That is an Arabic point that's talking about luck to the degree that would feel like it in any given moment would give you a sense of having fame and fortune without any of the problems that might come with that, or kind of the essence of what fame and fortune might, the things we think about, like wouldn't it be nice too, the idea that being so fortunate or being famous would bring us joy. That's something that the part of fortune can conjure in a place in the chart. Now, wouldn't you know it, it's with Chiron, and there's always going to be a bit of pain present where Chiron lies. Well, Chiron's in Aries. So essentially, what we're talking about here is a full moon in Taurus, where through the journey of Lilith in Scorpio over these last several months, we are recognizing the dark, ugly truth that leads us to understand in a much deeper way that which we value and that which is worth our effort and where we find our sense of worth and value in general. And of course, this is the access of resources as well. So there may be a lot of conversation around what's mine and what's yours. And the ruler being Venus, stressed out by, magnified by Jupiter, intensified and ready to transform by Pluto, and at the apex of this fated finger of God, which releases straight into Chiron and the part of fortune in Aries as the solution to all of this stress and magnification. Well, it's saying that the healing around self, self-connection, self-confidence, knowing the self, asserting the self, taking the risk, being fearless, being strong, being bold, that is kind of the answer to this conundrum. Now, the question, maybe I should have started with the question. Venus is the question, or Venus is the point here. So let's, of course, unpack what Venus is talking about. Venus is the ruler of both Taurus and Libra, the sign that she sits in during this lunation. Venus is going to be asking us to make a very serious decision under this lunar cycle. Like, I can never say final decision because, of course, we're going to have another full moon in, Taurus and Libra in every year. But this has a sort of finality to it. Again, it's not that 29th degree, but it's pretty freaking potent. And with the finger of God, and with Pluto, this lord of the underworld and absolutes and extremes, and doing a bit of surgery on Venus, and Jupiter really having taken us to a place of higher perspective, higher truth and big picture thinking and higher education over the last forever, but through the sign of Cancer since June. Well, with that all set to intertwine with Venus, we are looking at relationships, at what is healthy for us. Jupiter in Cancer, relationships with family might be a big thing here with Jupiter in Cancer, about how society impacts these relational dynamics, whether it's what society expects, our own subculture and culture, or if it's because of what's going on in society, it's impacting our relationship, our ability to be together or be harmonious because of, I don't know, whether you're in a war-torn country, all those who are suffering out there, my heart goes out to them. Or if you're just in a society that demands that you're, look, here we are in late stage capitalism slash officially an oligarchy in the United States. And many of us are bogged down by the responsibility, the demand to keep up, catch up, work when we're just, the middle and lower classes are middle is being erased and lower class being kind of squashed. So it's not very many of us that are just kind of flowing along in the society, thriving and feeling just fine. Most of us are getting pinched, pushed, prodded, and pulled, and relationships are affected by that. And really, this is also coming down to our relationship with ourself, that so many of us have been on a quest to improve ever since, especially since the North Node went into Aries. When was that? Back in mid 2023. We've all been on this journey of who am I? How do I address conflict? What am I doing in relationships? South Node in Libra that is really just not working for me anymore. And here it is coming to a head. I feel funny saying, oh, it's all about relationships right now because I feel like I've been singing that song for literally years. Like it's just been this nonstop, never-ending examination around relationships for so long that it's the main theme still present in our day. Well, the finger of God is gonna finger of God. This is all of us are going through a little fated checkpoint. Decide. Who are you? Who are you with? What's healthy for you? What are your family relationships? And is that more important than your relationship with yourself? Or how are you balancing that with your relationship with yourself? Knowing that I feel like I'm just singing my own story, but I'm sure a lot of you are feeling this too. Knowing that being your real authentic self and not shying away or diminishing yourself or camouflaging or chameleoning just for the sake of this peace and this harmony with whomever, that's just that isn't going to fly anymore. We can't do it. We're drowning in the things that we feel, the things that we need, in the health or the lack thereof condition of ourselves, our family, our community, especially if we have done the deep work of digging in and understanding the dark underbelly. It's not even an underbelly anymore. It's just kind of the darkness that is present in these structures and systems that are corrupt and kind of falling apart and dying away. The deep examination, says Pluto, of society, Aquarius. If we've done the work to understand how, family systems operate, to understand the human being and the human psyche and what it needs to function in healthy ways, and we understand that we are one part within the whole, then it's kind of impossible from this point forward to continue on pretending like we can just be okay with the dysfunction as it is and we'll just go our own way. Because we can't. We can't just go our own way and just do our thing if we're interested in this kind of work of deep honesty and healing and kind of liberation for all. Because we are not free until we are all free. We can't do that kind of work and then just float along in the toxic systems that exist, whether they're personal systems, our family systems, our subcultural system, the culture at large, a system, a company, an organization we're a part of, whatever that system may be that's falling apart. We can't pretend anymore. And I think that's a large part of Saturn, Neptune, a little, they're not in the perfect conjunction. That'll come in February, but dancing in the final degrees of Pisces, where Neptune has been flowing since 2011, doing some deep karmic work, some cleanup of the delusional fantasy land that we've been living in Pisces area of our lives. And Saturn's coming along saying, "No, it's time to grow up. We're getting more serious about this now. We're building a foundation for the next 30 years until Saturn comes back around." Of how we engage with that fantasy. Because, Pisces isn't all bad. It's not all lies and fantasy and delusion. Pisces is a necessary part of our lives. We're being called into Pisces right now with the North Node there. It's asking us to trust. This is, oh, getting more and more difficult. I don't know about you. I personally, I have Pisces on my fifth house. How funny that in this lunation, actually, I have 3 degrees on my fifth house cusp, as it just so happens to have fallen for this chart of the full moon in Taurus as I cast it for the Pacific Northwest here in Eugene, Oregon. So it just so happens that I'm a 26-degree Libra rising, and this is a 24-degree Libra rising chart. Funny enough. But I have Pisces on my house of Leo. It's one of my passions. It's one of my talents. And until Neptune started his journey there in 2011, one of my passions was escapism and delusion, absolute delusional fantasy land thinking. That's what I had been trained to do in my cultish upbringing. Cultish. In my cult upbringing. Let me just own that fully. Thank you. But now that Neptune is finishing out his journey there, it's been a weird one. Now I'm learning to harness my talent and my passion for trusting in the divine. And largely that has been afforded me by the gift of astrology and by working with sacred plant medicine. It's one of my favorite quotes. I don't know who said it, but that little idiom, nature does not rush, and yet all things are accomplished. I love that saying, and I have to remember that regularly. And working with plant medicine that has gotten me so much more in touch with nature and this planet has brought me to that, to recognizing, okay, permission to slow down. In my chart is like mostly air and fire, and all of my need for speed and expression and information, just slow down. There's time. All things will be accomplished. Nature will teach us that. Okay. And so I can trust. I can trust that there's a certain timing here. There's a divine timing. Neptune, divinity at best. Saturn, father time. Trust the North Node in divine timing. And finger of God essentially really screams to me, decide. Decide what you, Chiron and Aries, what the self, now that you're really healing and more in touch with the self, will tolerate and allow in relationships, in your connections, your contracts, and there's a little bit about finances here too, which could boil down to priorities or just understanding what you have as your resources, how you handle your valuables. Venus in Libra is really leaning more into the relationship side of things than the resource side of things. To me, this kind of screams, if I look into the outer world, this whole deciding about relational contracts, while we have the moon and the sun on the axis of what's mine and what's yours, of resources and assets in general. This speaks loudly with Pluto in Aquarius trining Uranus in Gemini to the ways we're starting to understand Venus in Libra relationship dynamics, because now we're so much more connected than ever, or at least we can perceive the connection parasocially to people like the billionaires of the world. So there's something about the dynamics of the relationship between the, let's say, the 1% and the rest of us, and how everything in life comes down to relationship. As society stands now, at least the Western world, but more and more globally, there's a prioritization of resources. You know, capitalism says that money is God, that having it, that achieving it, that possessing it, that that is power. But I think this full moon is starting to suggest an understanding that relationships are key, that relationships are power. This is why they say Saturn is exalted in the sign of Libra. Because what is life but relationship, Libra? And if your karmic responsibility, Saturn, is in that realm of understanding relational dynamics and harmonizing without losing the self, every Libra's lesson is to find me inside of we contract, then you learn constantly from every aspect of life. You're being gifted massive growth and life lessons in learning how to balance. First with self, according to astrology, Aries, it starts with self, and then with the earth, Taurus, and then with the mind, Gemini, and then with the family and how you nurture and root and care and the emotions, Cancer. And then with the inner child and our passions and the sense of play and exploration and experimentation, Leo. And then with a bit of purpose and practice, Virgo, how we show up and apply ourselves in a daily routine sort of way. And then we find harmony and it goes up to the higher signs from there. You see what I mean? This is relationship with everything starting from self. So while we may, in our own personal lives, be doing some really, really serious reflection or coming to a breaking point of determining, you know, making the decision, is it yes to this contract or is it a no? Are you in or are you out? I think of is you is or is you ain't my baby. Eh? As that might be happening in our personal worlds individually. There is a signature in this chart that speaks to the increasing feeling, Grand Water Trine, compassion, sorrow, grief, at recognizing the relationship, the relationships that we have societally, the relationships that those in power or those with resources, extreme resources that have gotten there by some serious greed, have with the rest of us. And we are starting to make our way. This isn't the breaking point where society snaps and turns to revolution. This isn't the revolt, but this is kind of a deciding factor moment. What is fair and what is not? That's how I feel about it anyway. So, okay, Mercury and Mars are in Sagittarius, and we are approaching the Mercury retrograde that starts on November 9th. So we are under this lunar cycle in the pre-shadow period. This is a wild one, you guys. I will talk about this, of course, in the next video. I may even make a separate video on the Mercury retrograde alone, just because there's so much to understand there. And of course, with Mercury in Sagittarius, I'm having a hard time finding the right words. I'm kind of, you can hear it in this video. I'm hearing my inner critic talk to me as I'm sharing my thoughts. I'm like, man, pick a lane. You're going in all these different directions at once. Gemini that I am. But yeah, Mercury and Sag has us really living mentally in the hindsight and the foresight and strategizing and hoping and looking for the inspiration. And it's not ready to create a plan yet. That will come later after this Mercury retrograde. And later down the road, we'll have a Venus and Mars cazimi in Capricorn, and that is the beginning of the plan. But Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius and back into Scorpio is really just doing a deep examination of the truth, what is just and what is unjust. This is a spitfire Mercury retrograde coming up. Transformative, intense. Yeah. Watch your backs, everyone. No, that's a little fear casty, isn't it? I take that back. Don't watch your back. But yeah, the mind is ready to see. And I think people who haven't been ready to see yet are gonna have to see some things very soon here. So that's my take on this full moon. I will be back very soon, either with Mercury retrograde insight, or you'll see me in the next video, the new moon in Scorpio. For those of you who've been with me for a while, you know that I'm on the edge of my seat, ready to bring out my Mormon story. And there's been a lot. I've been talking about it for a while. I made some videos about it earlier this year, right around the new moon in Taurus, actually. And then I took those videos down. I've been involved in a lawsuit. There's been some question about how much of my story I can share while that lawsuit is open. And there's been some stuff about my own emotional and mental health and moving through some of the deep, wells of grief and sorrow, and getting myself to a place where I'm regulated enough to really speak and share my story from a place of ownership rather than from a place of victimhood and, processing on camera, which is not what I want to do. So I know I keep promising I will be sharing my story. It's quite a doozy. But there's just a little more that needs to be tied up in the background before I come out with that. But be looking for it soon, possibly by the end of 2025. You'll know when I'll share it when I'm ready. In the meantime, if you would like a more personalized focus reading, if you would like to understand how these transits are interacting with your personal chart, or if you would like to have a relationship chart, a solar return chart, a look at your year ahead from birthday to birthday, or even a mini reading, which I am offering now, 30-minute readings for $50, be sure to visit my website, black-light-astrology.com, and you can check out my content on Instagram. Thanks so much for being here on YouTube. Please hit like, hit subscribe, and share this video with anybody you think might find it interesting. And thank you all for being here. Drop a comment below to let me know how you're feeling under this full moon, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the next one. Happy full moon, everybody.